I now want to bring back Professor Greening and his panel to take us to the next discussion. So I know Professor Greening, Thomas, and Torben are all in the background there. Thank you for joining us. Okay. So Professor Greening is back on again. You may have heard his keynote speech earlier on, which I think was again another enlightening part of the segment. So the discussion panel is going to talk about a topic which is very interesting to all of us. Is sustainability a tool for building resilience in a fast-changing world? And this panel basically wraps up this segment on the environment, on sustainability. And Professor Greening, in your hands.
Thank you. That's always dangerous when I hear that in my hands. Okay, we'll do our best. Thank you. I feel obliged to give you a bit of a breather in this panel, but so I'll let you introduce yourself last. But it's probably a good idea for the rest of the panel to introduce themselves briefly and say a little bit about the business and who they are and what their interests are. So perhaps if we start with Torben to introduce yourself, that'd be.
Yes, so hello everyone. So my name is Torben. I'm originally from Denmark. Been living in the UAE now for almost 11 years, going on 11 years. I have a long experience of plus 20 years in the shipping and logistics. Have worked in Asia, United States, and Europe, and now here in the Middle East, warehousing, international shipping, and so on. I recently joined a company called halal. We are into food security. Building up safety stock of food reserves, strategic food reserves in the UAE, partly because of the crisis that we saw with COVID-19, and we are also into growing, UAE-produced food and vegetables for a sustainable future for the UAE to be self-sufficient, and of course, with the environment and the water consumption and sustainability for the country. So that's me. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Torben. And Thomas, would you like to do the same?
Thank you so much, Professor Greening. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you so much also to the organizers for inviting me to join this wonderful session. My name is Tomás Guerrero. I'm the manager of the Halal Trade and Marketing Center here in Dubai. It's a global business development center focused on the halal economy opportunities for the industry. Basically, we are facilitating halal trade worldwide through Dubai, supporting companies as well as institutions to expand their operations in the Muslim majority countries where the halal certification, as many of you already know, it's mandatory for selling different types of consumer goods.
Great, thank you very much, Thomas. And Emma, just in case some people have joined us, if a brief, again.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Emma Barber. I'm the Managing Director of D-Grade Clothing. We repurpose PET plastic into textiles.
Great, thank you very much. So to the audience, this is your opportunity to ask the panel questions as well. If you post them in the chat, but we will have 15 minutes at the end of our sort of panel discussion where we specifically invite questions from the audience, and the session is much better if you do pose questions. We all enjoy discussing things more than we do preaching. Well, sorry, I was speaking for everybody. There might be people who prefer preaching, of course. So I've got a question to kick things off, and that is really about in my sort of presentation, I was talking about the climate change imperative, and I think to greater or lesser extents, you all have businesses that are impacted by the climate change agenda. So I'd like to understand a bit better how climate change and the broader sustainability challenge, because it is different. Climate change can be teased away from sustainability a bit, how it's affecting your business now, but more interestingly, how you think it will change your business over the next 3 to 5 years. And probably Torben, if we can start with you there.
Yeah, so from a climate change perspective, we're definitely seeing now as a halal, we have a mandate to go from approximately 20,000 metric ton of fruit and vegetable produced in the UAE to plus 100,000 metric tons within the next 5 years. So we are supposed to more than 5 times that in just 5 years. And what, of course, we are seeing is that in order for us to produce that kind of volume, we need a massive access to irrigation systems. Unfortunately, despite all the talk about, high-tech farms, vertical farms, and so on, what we see, especially for this country, is that it's not really sustainable because the longevity of those kind of systems are too expensive compared to the return of investment. So what we of course is one of the things we are seeing, with the rain, with almost no rain last year in the UAE. We're seeing, that the wells and the groundwater has almost been depleted or is in serious need of more water. And we, of course, seeing, rising temperatures and all of that. We're seeing definitely a need for investing in more greenhouses. And we're also seeing a need of looking at wastewater management more aggressively. So wherever we are using water, being it for wash down and or being it for cleaning or for landscaping, whatever, that we look at an opportunity to use that kind of water for irrigation, for fresh fruit and vegetable, for food. So definitely, I mean, if we talk from environment point of view, there's a more increased focus than ever, I would say, on it, especially from the water scarcity we see in the Middle East, with less and less water coming down.
It's quite interesting that, because we did a study, must be 10 years ago now, where we were trying to look sort of 100 years into the future to see where businesses would locate and what resources they need. And top of that list is water always. You need water to generate power, you need water to grow crops, you need water for all sorts of industrial processes. And the pattern of rainfall is changing in most countries, including the UK, which is notoriously wet. So, yeah, we might come back to that in a minute. Thomas, same question to you, really, which, just to remind you, is how climate change and the broader sustainability challenge is affecting your business now and in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. Obviously, the halal industry is also impacted by climate change. By the way, as you already know, halal means the lawful as per the Islamic law, but this concept, this Arabic term, is also so close to another one, which is tayyib, and tayyib means healthy, those which is healthy for the human beings, for all human beings. So healthy and tayyib, they are close to the halal concept. For that reason, now the halal standards are also starting to include some requirements regarding the sustainability from the production point of view. So that's the way today. And obviously, for example, when the certifiers, they are auditing farms, they are starting also to check the impact of their productions on the climate change. Many halal authorities in the Muslim majority countries, they are also they are opening the debate to try to introduce some requirements in line with the sustainability. Why? Because it's not possible to have something tayyib, something healthy, when you produce, against the environment. So now we are starting, as I told you, to see how the halal authorities are, discussing how to include some specific requirements for companies producing halal certified goods. And those requirements, some of them, they are, related to how we can, from the halal point of view, reduce the impact on the climate change with the halal production.
That's really interesting, actually. So is that regulatory, or is that sort of from the community?
But maybe it's good to explain. The halal certification is already regulated. The problem is we don't have a global halal standard. We have different rules, different standards from different Muslim majority countries for regulating the same market. But many of them, especially in the Southeast Asia, they are starting to open this discussion to see how we can, as I told you, incorporate some requirements to comply with the ECGs, and sustainability obviously is there, and how we can not force, but guide companies through the halal requirements to come with more sustainable, healthy, tajib way of producing consumer goods.
Excellent. So that's the sort of food perspective from two panel members. Sort of for a contrasting maybe view, Emma.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a slightly different perspective, because I think when we started the business 10 years ago, or when Chris started the business 10 years ago, sustainability wasn't really at the forefront of very many companies' goals or objectives. And actually, very few companies had CSR policies. But I think because of over the last decade, especially the emphasis on climate change, global warming, conserving resources, that the backlash against plastic, it's actually brought CSR to the forefront of very many companies' objectives. So I think that has helped us, because obviously, of course, whilst we were still plodding away, setting up the business 10 years ago, it was you were knocking on some fairly closed doors. Now you knock on doors and they're very, they're open. Companies want and need to find green options for products that they're already buying. So, that if they are buying uniforms, why not, show to their shareholders or their stakeholders or their consumers, customers, that they're trying to do something that's not greenwashing, that's taking some tangible step to, actually implementing some kind of green policy to help their overall CSR objective. So that really helps. And not only that, but actually, the fact that our process is so much greener, I outlined in my presentation that we produce fewer carbon emissions. We don't use much energy. We use little less water, and we recycle it. We don't use any oil. So these are all things that I think are, they're going hand in hand with most people's, companies, governments' plans to try and head off global warming sooner rather than later.
Yes. So I think that brings me to the next point, which is the sort of the focus of the panel session, which is the relationship between sustainability and resilience. And I'd be interested in each of your opinions on how your sustainability position, how you think that impacts the resilience in this sort of fast-changing world where climate change is starting to dominate everything. To go in a slightly different order this time. Thomas, do you want to go first on that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't hear you well. I'm facing some technical issues. Sorry.
So the question really is about what is the relationship from your point of view between sustainability and resilience? And
resilience.
Yeah. So resilience is the ability of a system to recover.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is quite a testing
I think maybe this question is a deep one, and it's better to have Mr. Torben or Mr. Emma, replying, because from the halal point of view, we don't have, exactly response to that point.
Okay, well, let's see whether anybody does, because that in itself would be revealing, wouldn't it, if we haven't drawn that connection. So, Torben or Emma or both of you.
Yeah, no, I'll be happy to start. I've definitely, for Halal, we have to have resilience in place, because we're trying to build a sustainable environment in the UAE to be more self-sufficient for fruit and vegetables and food production in the UAE. At the same time, because we are not self-sustainable and we are not self-sufficient, we have to build that resilience by building our food reserves. So we have contingency plannings in place. We have emergency plannings in place. We do drills and exercises with the government and all related government entities related to is there's a power outage, there is a flood, there's earthquake, there's war, there's another pandemic, and so on. So we have different scenarios that we exercise, and that also deals with supply disruptions. And any kind of risk assessment to the business. So we have obviously, as I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned earlier, but we had a discussion about it earlier regarding we look at what is the diet the human being needs to in order to survive. What is the consumption of each product that the human needs for X amount of months. And what is the scarcity of that product? Can we easily get access to it, or is it only produced one place in the world, and so on? So through that, we try to build a robust and resilient supply chain, and then we build safety stocks and strategic reserves in warehouses. And we also do a geographic risk assessment. So, should there be a war or should there be an earthquake or whatever, a natural disaster, we will not have all our strategic reserves in one warehouse. So obviously we spread also frozen and ABN and grains and rice and things like that, which we keep in storage in safety stock in the UAE. So it's really a very big Excel sheet or calculation on what do we eat, what do we need to eat, where do we need to have it, where is it coming from, how much do we need of it, how many months of consumption do we need, what is the average consumption a day per capita, and so on. So yeah, there's definitely a big part of that which involves resilience and which goes back to back with us trying to be more self-sufficient and trying to build that as a sustainable self-sufficiency going forward. I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's a big question. Yeah.
It is a big question. It sort of prompts another one before I move to Emma, which is sustainability is often perceived as being more expensive because you invest in capacity to allow you to recover. And sometimes if you compare that with the less sustainable options, which might be getting food from other countries where the investment in sustainability isn't needed as much, because they're not as vulnerable to high temperatures or water or problems or whatever. Where that sweet spot sort of lies, at what point do you say, well, to be sustainable here is going to be too expensive and we need to think about going to less sustainable options that are more resilient? How do you analyze those trade-offs? So I'll move to Emma then on that note.
Okay. Well, I think Tobin gave a really fantastic example of how resilience works if you're a company. But I think also, what strikes me is you have to be quite resilient as a person. Of course, your company has to be resilient and be able to make money and do all the things that it needs to do. But being in the industry that we're in, we get a lot of negative pushback, especially because people think that we're advocating plastic and plastic is so contentious and really can generate quite a lot of strong feeling, let's say. So I've the sort of things I've written down about resilience and kind of the points that came into my head were do your research, be strong in your belief and maintain your focus, because I have to do quite a lot of research because I get pushed back about people asking me about microfibers or, toxins on your skin, or is plastic, safe. So, I've done a lot of research to try and, be resilient in the face of some of those, quite demanding and challenging conversations. And I have to also really believe that what we do is for the best. We are trying to repurpose plastic. It was always meant to be recycled, and we're trying to do that and turn it into a product that's useful, not just making, a promotional quality T-shirt that's going to be worn once and become another single-use plastic item, but making a high-quality product. So I have to believe that we are doing something right, and we have to focus. We have to be resilient. We have to keep focused. Just do what we do. We called Simply Bottles because you could go on forever trying to recycle everything. People say, why just bottles? Why just PET? But you've got to start somewhere. You have to eat the elephant in small bites. So, the focus is crucial to maintain that resilience in business. So, I can talk a lot about how Degrade is resilient, but I just think, to keep it personal, that's how I maintain my resilience.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yes. So we have one question from the audience. Sanjay, I don't know whether you can turn on your mic and camera. It would be good if you can. If you can't, I'll read out your question.
Yeah. Definitely turn on. Can you hear me? I suppose
yes,
you can.
We can hear you. Yes. So you can go ahead.
Thank you.
Sanjay, and
Thank you. Thank you so
question.
much. I'm sorry. I'm a bit on outside and don't want to turn on the camera. So thank you so much, Professor Greening and Joe. My question is a bit simple. As supply chain leaders, which are the factors that we can actually garner a critical mass support from industry and customers to build sustainability? One of the things I feel is if we have to build sustainability on a wider scale, you need a lot of support from industry groups and customers on a mass scale level. And what tools are available for supply chain leaders like us? That was my question, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go with that one?
That's a tough one. I think, I'm absolutely not a supply chain leader, so I'm probably not the best qualified to answer this, and it's a really interesting question. I do think there is something about partnerships, Anjay. About you mentioned about getting people involved and getting to a critical mass or a tipping point. And for us at Degrade, that is the crucial thing to be able to be resilient in our supply chain, or at least be sustainable and make sure that we're moving goods in a practical and economical and efficient way. So for us, it is about education, making people understand that we're here. I saw one of the questions that somebody said they wish they'd known about us when they lived in Dubai, and that's kind of maybe a fault of ours for not spreading the word quickly enough or getting it out there. So this is not a particular supply chain answer, but just in general, I think that you're absolutely right. You kind of answered your own question. For me, it's a tipping point and a critical mass.
Anybody else want to chip in about the critical mass?
For example, here in our case, from the halal market point of view, for example, the halal logistic services, they are gaining ground as the demand for the halal products is also growing worldwide across the world. So, for example, in our case, we are working with the standards, obviously, for trying to have a traceability system in order to allow to have, from farm to fork system, allowing halal certified companies to control, also to obviously allowing them the logistics and transport companies and the final consumers to control the full supply chain in order to guarantee the traceability of the halal certified products.
Yes, yeah, I can pick up on that in a minute. But Torben, do you have anything you'd like to say on sort of supply chain leadership? And
yeah, I think from my point of view, I think there's we have a mandate or responsibility as business leaders to try to change the culture and really enforce the value and ethics upon each other. It's a quality culture that we need to appreciate rather than a quantity culture. And I think this is maybe one of the things that I see as the most biggest challenge. I mean, if we examine what the word sustainable mean, it means that we should be able to meet our own needs, sustainable, but without compromising the ability of others in the future. And that obviously means our sons and daughters and the future generations. So we need to make a sustainable future for not only for ourselves, but also for others. So I think it is really, from my point of view, it is about making a sustainable future. We need to enforce more value and ethics, and we need to build a quality culture. So it's really among ourselves as supply chain leaders to try to enforce that throughout the stakeholders. When you ask what can we do, I think it starts with yourself. It starts with all of us to build that kind of value and ethics and among ourselves and among our network, immediate network, and then try to bring that up as a quality culture. So I think that's my answer to that.
No, well, that takes me neatly onto my next question, which is really about how do we change behaviour, and to what degree do you see that as your business's job, or do you see that as something that governments should be leading or other institutions? And if it is the job of others, then how do we best engage with those others to deliver behavioural change? Because we don't have that long to change behaviours, and they're very embedded in society. It's a severe challenge, isn't it? So, Emma, I think this probably sort of comes down to your sort of field a lot, in the sense that you more traditional sort of marketing engagement with consumers.
Yes, changing behaviour is crucial, and for Degrade, it's we have to get people to change their behaviours. But I think just in general, global warming, and of course we can't do it without the government. And so we actually are working really closely with the Environment Agency in Abu Dhabi and the MOCCE to try and it's carrot and stick, isn't it? I think in a lot of European countries, and I lived in London, if you didn't put your recycling in the right bin, the bin men wouldn't pick up your bin. You had problems like that. Whereas here in this region, there is no incentive to recycle, and so we are working with the EAD to try and put in a deposit return scheme to encourage and reward people for recycling plastic. And I think in this region, hopefully, carrot will be a better push than the stick, than penalising people for not doing something. But it has to be legislated in terms of making it. The government have to support it. There's no point doing a grassroots campaign without some kind of support. Otherwise, it will be very local and it will be very short term. This has to be long term, I think.
Good. Torben?
Yeah, so I agree with Emma. There has to be a definite government support, and I think this is also what we as Halal, being a semi-government initiative, where we're trying to build a sustainable and self-sufficient growth of farmers in the UAE. And I know it's very a big challenge, and as a message to change that culture, it's a huge challenge, because we are trying to call on the national pride of the UAE. It's proudly produced in the UAE, locally manufactured, and to buy local. But it's also clear, the human behavior when it comes to the consumer behavior, they will not pay necessarily a huge amount of money additional for something that's locally produced if they don't think they're getting just as good product, if it's very high difference. So there is both economic performance that you need to consider as a company. At the same time, when you're trying to take care of the environment and you're trying to take care of society for the future generations. So I think you need to consider all of them, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a sustainable growth among the farmers, while we're trying to change the culture. And what we're obviously trying to do, we're trying to raise the bar. We're trying to build more volume in the market, so there's enough food for everyone. And at the same time, also the taste and the quality of the product is the same or is just as good as what you can get in Europe. So we all know from in UAE, a lot of fruit and vegetables are imported, and this is where, of course, we're trying to drive medium to high tech greenhouses, irrigation techniques, better seeds, better quality, different kind of focus on where we should be planting, areas regarding the soil and stuff like that. So we're trying to build a little bit more based on technology, not just on where is the current farm's location. So for us, it's really about changing the culture. There's a lot of things. We need to make it sustainable. We need to make a better taste. We need to make economically just as good. And then at the same time, we need to try to improve the pride of the national people to buy local instead of only buying imported. So that, I think there's a lot of elements. So it's a very, very difficult question, but definitely from the government side in the UAE, that we are trying to support that change.
And because Thomas, you've got a good case study in this, haven't you? Really, in the sense that halal has managed to institutionalize to some degree changes in behaviour, which I think is remarkable.
Yes. First of all, it's a very good question. And in our case, it's clear, no? We are coming with the legal framework, with the regulation, with the standards to, make mandatory especially not only in the Muslim majority countries, also in the non-Muslim majority ones, where, by the way, the largest producers are based in many cases. So we are making mandatory the halal certification for selling different types of consumer goods, not only food, because people think that halal is only for meat or for food products. We are going beyond. Now we are working with cosmetics, also with pharma products, and we are starting to develop comprehensive standards and regulations in order also to make mandatory for companies in those sectors the halal certification in order to sell and market their products in the Muslim majority countries. And that's honestly, that's the way to sometimes to make the industry players to understand, our needs in this part of the world, in the Muslim majority countries, because obviously for producers sometimes getting the halal certification, comply with the requirements, define traceability system is not easy, or it's not cost effective, but we are sure that the halal way of producing is the best one, not only for Muslims, also for non-Muslim. By the way, many consumers now from the many non-Muslim consumers from sectors such as healthy or bio, they are starting also in Europe and US to demand and consume halal goods, because they are thinking that that's a good way to produce food, and those products are healthy, and they have behind a strong traceability system to avoid them to eat those raw materials or ingredients that they think they are unhealthy for them. So through the regulation, if not obviously for companies, for the industry players, it's business as usual. So we are coming with this comprehensive legal framework to make mandatory the halal certification to those companies who want to sell those consumer goods, not only here in the UAE, also in the remaining Muslim majority countries. And for example, now, because as I told you, we don't have a halal global standard, no? So, and that's an issue. But now we have two global initiatives. We have the International Halal Accreditation Forum here in the UAE, trying to harmonize the halal accreditation practices worldwide. And we also have in Turkey, in Istanbul, the SMIC. SMIC is the standardization body from the OIC, the organization for the 57 Muslim majority countries, and they're starting to produce global halal standards to have the same requirements for all the Muslim majority countries, despite the product. So through the regulation, we are changing the behavior of the industry players, as well as the behavior or the way of thinking, the mindset of the consumers about halal, its benefits for the human beings.
Yeah, it's good. So I just want to encourage the audience, if you've got a question, now is the time to pose it. And we would all welcome it as a panel. It's easier to have questions from the audience than it is to sort of bounce things around in our little echo chamber here. So please feel free to pose a question. As we don't have one in the bank, as it were, I got a question for all of you, really, which is, what 3 things would you like to change in the next 12 months? If you had a magic wand, what would the 3 things be that you would change?
Blimey. Well, I mean, I think we'd all be glad to see the back of COVID.
Well, that's a good answer, yes.
I mean, whilst I 100% agree that we've got to, it would be great if we could, keep a check on travel and tourism, I suppose, especially in very delicate parts of the world. And I saw that they're looking to introduce toll booths going into Venice after the fact that they were so used to not having any visitors. Now they're all coming back again. Putting that aside, which I do believe we do need to travel less, but I do think as well, if we could get to some kind of herd immunity or position where we feel safer to just go back to what used to be more of a sort of normal or regular routine, so we can maintain some of the consumer habits of the past. I really do feel like that should be balanced, because I don't think anybody wants to see the rise of fast fashion or over consumption of product that we don't need. But we do want to stimulate economies around the world, and if that means buying good quality, long-lasting products, then I think we would all be behind that. And so I suppose the main thing that would stand out for me, I have to think of 2 others, but at the end of COVID would be a good one.
Okay, we'll give you a bit of breathing space, because that was a good one. Torben or Thomas, have you got anything on your wish list? Because politicians always ask these questions, don't they? Yeah, they say, well, tell us what you need. And as academics and business people, we have to be able to tell them what we want. Otherwise, they assume nothing, and nothing changes. And from where I sit in the world, that's not an acceptable outcome, because climate change will then just happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. I think, we do need legislation around, in this region, around some kind of recycling and waste management, let's say. It's not just all about recycling. I mean, Tobin, when we talked the other day, what really struck me was, about the food waste. I think, this region has a particularly high bad record for, taking too much food. There's lots of all-you-can-eat buffets or brunches or all these sorts of things. So I think, strong government support. And by the way, the government really are working hard to look at ways which they can tackle recycling and waste management here in the region. But it's been very slow, and it's been better in Dubai than it has in Abu Dhabi, quite honestly. So again, from my perspective, more tangible and quicker government support in terms of legislation would be very, very welcome for our business.
Good. Anything from the other panel members? I see there's some questions coming up. I think.
Hello.
Hello. I don't know who that is, but if you could say who you are and ask the question.
Yes, it's actually Anita from Malaysia. Yeah. So my question, maybe it goes to Thomas. So the legislation that you're talking about on the halal certifications, is that only for you did say on a global view as well, but currently is that via only the UAE? Because halal certifications is something that Malaysia was was probably a forerunner in the 70s or sorts onwards, because it's a big market here, pushing halal certified food and products. So I'm interested to know that is it only a focus in the legislation over the MENA region or in the wider global market? And also, as a follow-on to that, I'm interested to understand, given like markets like in Australia and even in sometimes in the US, where you have pushback on halal products because of the minority, Muslim communities and minorities, how does that impact the sourcing of material or products for the halal logistics side, if that makes any sense to anybody?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your questions. Regarding the halal logistics momentum, first of all, I have to say that we only have two standards for regulating this business niche from the halal point of view. As you said, Malaysia is doing a great job in this field. So in Malaysia was the pioneer developing halal standard for logistics. So still today, this is the main reference for companies in this sector. And then a few months ago, SMIC, the standardization body from the OIC, came also with a standard for halal logistics. These standards want to be the main reference, the global one, but the problem in the halal logistics space, we have different issues. First of all, these two halal standard, the Malaysian one, as well as this new one coming from SMIC, they are not mandatory. So they are not forcing companies from the logistics sector to get certified if they want to transport or if they want to move halal certified goods across the world. Then secondly, and this is an issue highlighting many occasions, many times by industry players in the logistic space, these standards are not cost effective. Sometimes the requirements for the halal or for the logistics players, they are making them to, or they force them to have separate business lines, separate facilities, and so it's sometimes they need to invest a lot of money to have in place or to comply with the halal logistic requirements in those standards. So for many players in the logistic area, is not cost effective. So they are not even when it's not mandatory. If they want, they are, how to say, declining that possibility, because when they check the halal requirements, they think that they will be having to invest, they will be having to, to comply with strong requirements, allowing or forcing them to segregate business lines. And obviously, there is a huge cost behind to do that. And for that reason, the industry players or the halal logistics companies, they are, how to say, a bit reluctant about this possibility. And obviously, the thing is, we want to have the full traceability for the halal products. Halal logistics for making the full supply chain safe from the halal point of view is critical, but we need to find the way to come with maybe not different requirements, but trying to be a bit flexible and making the then easy to get the halal certification for the logistics players worldwide, and finally also making the certification mandatory for those companies in the logistics space. So obviously we want to have a global legal framework, and it's not only for Malaysia or for MENA region or UAE. Here we also have our internal discussions about how to work, how to develop the halal logistics. But as I told you, it's not easy because obviously if we force logistics companies to get the halal certification and to comply with these demanding requirements, and maybe many of them, they will be saying no, and then we will be having a big issue because we are importing around the 60-70% of the consumer goods that we are consuming. So we will be having a shock from the offer point of view, and we need to double check and work in a smart way to try to develop globally and regionally this sector.
Thank you, Thomas. My dog is telling me, and Joe is as well, that it's time to wrap up. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for participating in this. It's always challenging when you're doing it electronically. And I'd like to thank the audience for being patient with us, and hand back to Joe to do whatever he's going to do next. Thank
you, Professor Greening. It was really good having you guys on the panel. I know it was a tough panel discussion, very, very tricky, but these are the questions we are asking ourselves. Sustainability, resilience, agility, moving forward in a very tough situation. But thank you, Emma, Thomas, Torben, and Professor Greening for your attempt to actually tackle this tough subject. Very much appreciate your time and your contributions. Take care, and hopefully see you next time in Dubai.